Welcome back to the MovieBabble Podcast. This week you've got myself, Collin, and I'm joined by Brennan as we talk about the opening weekend for Ready or Not, Angel Has Fallen, and Overcomer. And remember, you can always check us out online at MovieBabbleReviews.com. Okay, so this week's top 5, opening in the number 1 spot, is Angel Has Fallen with $21.25 million domestically, followed by Good Boys in its second week at $11.75 million domestically. Overcomer opens up in the number 3 spot for $8.2 million domestic, followed by The Lion King in the number 4 spot with $8.15 million domestic, and Hobbs and Shaw rounds out the top 5 with $8.14 million domestic. So it's not a very aggressive box office right now. I'd say, I mean, the 3, 4, and 5 spot, we're just, we're in the hundreds of thousands, not even that, like a $50,000 difference between them. So it's a little bit competitive there. But I mean, Angel Has Fallen is doing pretty well. It's pretty much on track with the previous installments in the franchise. I mean, it's reviewed as poorly as the previous installments in the franchise as well, but it seems to be making a decent amount of money. It's a little over $21 million debut on a $40 million budget, and that's just domestically. So this movie should at least return its investment.
Yeah, for sure. I think that what you're seeing here, this movie pretty much opened to identical numbers of the last one, London Has Fallen, which came out in 2016. Now, Olympus Has Fallen posted a $30 million opening, but Olympus didn't really do big damage overseas, whereas you're looking at London Has Fallen did great overseas. Angel Has Fallen, we've yet to kind of see that foreign gross. We'll see that kind of soon. And I would expect that this movie does well overseas, does well domestically. And this also, Angel Has Fallen has the lowest budget of all 3 of the films in the franchise. I think that was such a smart move from Lionsgate. A really good idea just to kind of bring the budget down on this movie, be a little bit safe with it, and I think they're going to get a really good return over the next few weeks, and I think this could turn into a pretty profitable movie.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, this is a franchise. It makes for Lionsgate, it's pretty successful. They haven't had the best luck recently trying to launch a lot of stuff. I mean, they do have John Wick, which is just pulled in ridiculous numbers every time, but they do kind of have these little, just like really forgettable franchises, like the Has Fallen movies. I completely forgot these movies existed until I was beat over the head with the trailer for this every time I went to the movies this summer. But I guess I just don't have a ton to say about Angel Has Fallen.
Yeah, no, for me, there's not really much I need to touch on, but I think that they are the franchise has become decently profitable, and I think that we'll see when the foreign gross kind of comes in for this film. We'll see kind of if the trend continues, but it's looking like they made a smart move here by bringing the budget down a little bit and kind of maximizing their potential profits. So Angel Has Fallen looks like it's on pace to be kind of just as successful as the last few and just as poorly reviewed.
Yep. So we'll move on to the number 2 spot, which is Good Boys. This is its second week at the box office, pulled in $11.75 million, and it has a pretty small drop. It's only 45.1%, which is pretty good as far as when you're looking at how much a movie drops, especially for a comedy. It's retaining a pretty solid audience, and it's already made quite a bit of money back on its budget. It was budgeted around 20 million. It's already at 48, almost 49 million worldwide right now. And so it's making money.
Yeah, for sure. This is a film that I think will have decent legs. I mean, next weekend's Labor Day weekend. It's not going to be an overly crowded weekend. You're going to see pretty much all the same films you're seeing now in theaters, just kind of continuing. So I'd expect this movie to kind of hold on next weekend as well and continue to see decently small drop-offs. And this movie's kind of starting to roll out overseas this weekend and next weekend. So I'd expect this movie to just continue to rake in the money because it's kind of a simple concept. You know what you're kind of getting yourself into with this film by watching the trailer, and it's an enjoyable movie. I think it'll continue to pull in the money, and we might see this thing even surpass 100 million worldwide by the time it's done.
Yeah, and I mean, this is one of the few comedies to really take off this year. I mean, I think the most notable one that kind of flopped would be Stuber last month. But it just hasn't been a very forgiving summer for movies in general, and comedy has kind of really been hit by that. And Good Boys just seems to be one of the successes amidst all these flops or barely make the budget back movies that we've seen over the past couple months.
For sure.
Yeah, so in the number three spot was Overcomer with 8.2 million. I did not know this movie existed until this week when I saw it on the coming releases list. It's made again, it's 8.2 million. It's got about a $5 million budget, which is pretty typical for these type of kind of religious movies for Affirm Films or I forget like Good Flicks or whatever the other big Christian
Pure
film,
flicks.
Pure Flicks. That's what it is. Yeah, it's pretty solid budget for this kind of film, and a pretty standard return on it so far. This movie's not just going to have great legs, I don't think. Well, one thing that you really notice with most of these religious movies is they tend to release around Easter or Christmas, and that really carries them through for quite a while. But we don't have any big holidays coming up as far as uh, the Christianity goes. But this movie's coming out at the end of August, so it's kind of an odd time to drop it. But I think it'll make a decent amount of money. It's already made a decent amount of money. I just don't think it's going to hang around very long.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think that this weekend and next weekend, as I said, being Labor Day weekend, it'll make its money this weekend and next weekend. I think probably the play was that they couldn't really find a holiday to fit this thing around, so they wanted to throw it late August so it would have its opening weekend, then have Labor Day to kind of fall on in its second weekend. So I think that given that they'll make the money that they want to make. They'll be profitable and they'll do solid. But yeah, I agree. This movie isn't going to hang around for a while, but it's going to attract its base and it's going to make some decent money.
Yeah, so that is Overcomer. And then The Lion King is in the number four spot, once again making buku bucks. It's sitting around 1.5 billion right now. It's currently the ninth highest grossing movie of all time, which is just wild. And it pulled in another 8 million, another really small drop of just 33, almost 34%. And I think we're just going to keep continuing to see this for quite a while because blockbuster season is over. The next big movie we have is It Chapter 2 in 2 weeks. But as far as something that's kind of direct, family friendly Lion King competition, we don't really have just a ton in the immediate future. So I think Lion King's going to hang around and continue to pull in just ridiculous amounts of money.
Yeah, it just surpassed $1.5 billion. That's a huge milestone. Now, 1.6 billion might be a bit of a stretch, but you're going to see this thing make several more tens of millions of dollars over the next few weeks, kind of with Labor Day, kind of just the weekends down the road, because it has shown that it got great legs. It doesn't quite have Aladdin legs, but it didn't need to, considering it had just that monstrous opening weekend. So yeah, this is just continuing to make a ton of money.
Yeah, and I think so. It's the ninth highest grossing movie of all time. I think it could very easily become the seventh by the end of its run. It's only sitting about 8 million behind Furious 7 and about 9.5 million behind the Avengers. That is the first Avengers movie, and so I think it'll definitely make those up, especially if it's pulling in 8 million this week. It granted won't pull in as much next week, but it's not going away anytime soon, and so I think we'll see it slowly inch ahead of those two. And I don't think it'll cross the number six spot. Jurassic World is sitting about 160 some odd million ahead of it. So unless there's like a Lion King extended re-release or something crazy, I don't think we'll see it move much further up the charts. But just the fact that it's already cracked the top 10 is insane.
Yeah, for sure. This thing just it's just continuing to make ridiculous amounts of money, and I think we're gonna see that kind of teeter off a little bit, maybe in a month or so. But the next few weeks is going to continue to make solid cash.
Yeah. And speaking of movies that are making solid cash, the number five spot, rounding out the top five, is Hobbs and Shaw, which pulled in just a little bit below Lion King at 8.14 million. It also had its China release this week and made just ridiculous amounts of money there. It's sitting at 588, almost $89 million worldwide. And it just opened in China, so we'll see that number climb fairly significantly here in the next week or so.
Yeah, this is a film that is about to surpass 150 million domestically. It's making good money, but as you said, it opened up in China and it made $100 million in China this past weekend, 102 exactly, which is the second highest opening in the franchise in China. Now that is still well behind The Fate of the Furious, which opened up to 184 million in China, but still to be the second highest opening of the franchise in China is great. This movie will probably surpass 200 million in China. That's kind of conservative estimates. This thing could even get up as high as 250, 275, 300 in China. So it'll be interesting to see kind of how that plays out. But now the fact that it's up to about 588 million worldwide, I don't think they're going to worry as much about this, about kind of their profits as the weeks go on. I'm not 100% sure where the end point is for Hobbs and Shaw, but I think for sure 700 million is safe. It's a safe bet. I think they'll definitely pass that.
Yeah, I don't see it crossing a billion. It's not going to pull in as much money as some of the previous Fast and Furious installments, but it is making really good money. It's more than justified its existence as a spinoff and has just kind of continued to prove that we're not tired of seeing cars blow up and gratuitous shots of bikinis and butts. So, way to go, Hobbs and Shaw. So we'll move on to some other releases that did not crack the top five, but are either new releases this week or have slowly been expanding. So the first is Ready or Not, which is I guess it's technically a Disney film. It's a Fox Searchlight movie. It's the hide and seek movie, and it opened up to 7.5 million, just a little over that. So it's in the number six spot, and I love this movie. I'm gonna be honest. It's one of the just wackiest, most fun, but also like really good in terms of its horror elements, horror movies. It reminds me a lot of Cabin in the Woods, just in terms of like the tone of it. And I have very rarely had that much fun watching a horror movie.
That's a good sign. I'm definitely going to check this movie out soon. I've heard a lot of great things, and I didn't really know what to make of this movie when I first saw the trailer a few months ago. I thought it was interesting. I didn't really have super high expectations for it, but then I saw the reviews start to pour it, and I saw all the great reception that this movie was getting, and I'm definitely really interested in. This movie did come out on a Wednesday, so it did get a midweek release, so it made 7.5 this weekend, but 10.5 total so far if you include kind of the Wednesday Thursday gross. So 10.5 for the first 5 days. I doubt this movie had a crazy high budget, so it should make its money back in terms of marketing and budget. I don't think it'll turn a massive profit, but I think it should be okay financially. But I think it's a great sign that we're kind of getting a movie that is this good, kind of great fan reaction, great critic reaction. I think it's great to see that kind of in a late summer time slot for a horror film.
Yeah, and we're starting to really kick off the horror season in earnest now. So we have Ready or Not opening up obviously this weekend. We've got It Chapter 2 in a couple weeks, and then we will really just heavily hit our slate of horror movies for the next 2.5 months ish. And I think it was a great start to the horror movie season. Like I cannot stress enough just like how enjoyable this is. I kind of went into it pretty wary because of Truth or Dare that came out last year. And so when I saw the trailer for this, I thought it was another gimmicky, like, oh, let's take a well-known game and make a dumb movie out of it. But it actually manages to be like this really just smart, really fast, really fun movie about rich people trying to kill people with antique weapons. And I mean, really, what more could you ask for?
No, for sure.
So we'll move away from horror and we'll go to a movie that changed Shia LaBeouf as a person, in his own words, and that is The Peanut Butter Falcon, which I did get a chance to catch this week as well. It opened up wide. It's been slowly expanding these past couple weeks, but it did open up wide, had a little bit over 3 million for its gross this week, and it's honestly one of my favorite movies of the year. Like it's just this really sincere, heartfelt journey about Shia LaBeouf, and he plays this outlaw, and he meets a kid with Down syndrome who wants to become a pro wrestler, and it's just kind of their hijinks together, and their bond is almost like a father and son situation, and it's just one of the most really heartfelt movies I've seen this year, and was just a really nice breath of fresh air coming into um, the awards movie season, where we're going to start having a lot more of these smaller movies, or less blockbusters. There's more dramas, basically, is the point of the year we're getting into, and this was a really good entry point for me into that.
Yeah, this is a movie that has kind of been on my radar these last few weeks. Now, it's not out in Canada yet up here, so I haven't been able to uh, check it out. But it's great to see that this movie made a lot of money this weekend. I mean, over $3 million for a film kind of this scale. Only 991 theaters too. So I mean, you look at the per theater average, and this movie did really well in terms of just raw per theater average. It was 10th, which isn't too bad considering we had a lot of uh, kind of 1, 2, 3 theater releases this weekend of kind of just more focused, smaller films. So I think that it did a really solid job, and I'm really excited to see this movie expand. I think it's a really interesting uh, premise and story. So I'm definitely excited to see it. I'm glad you enjoyed it, and I definitely want to see it get up here in Canada soon.
Yeah, and I think they were really smart in how they rolled this out. So a lot of the big theater chains had an early showing, kind of a preview kind of thing, about 2 weeks ago. So I know AMC and Regal did it pretty much nationwide, and they gave out free tickets, and so I think they generated a lot of positive buzz that way, and really helped carry it this weekend. And I don't think it'll expand just a ton more, but for a movie like this, you don't really need to. Um, and so I think it'll continue to earn pretty solid box office haul. And I haven't been able to find numbers on the budget, but having seen the movie, I can't imagine it was that large of a budget. So this movie is going to be a pretty solid financial success, if I had to guess.
Yeah, for sure. I think I definitely agree with that notion.
Yeah. And so yeah, go see this movie. It's great. It's hilarious. It's really sincere. It's actually a part of my favorite genre of movies, which is the genre where John Bernthal shows up for less than 5 minutes. He
That's also
seems
my
to,
favorite genre.
for the past 4 years, once a year, he's in a movie where he literally shows up for like 5 minutes. I don't know why Hollywood has decided to put him in this scenario, but that's where he's at. And so it was nice to briefly see him again. I can't wait to see what he does next year. But that's pretty much it for
Oh
Peanut Butter Falcon.
God, you know what?
And
That's perfect. That's perfect. I saw him kind of in the cast list, and I wanted to ask you after we were done recording what he did, and just to hear that he was back doing his thing, doing his little 5 minute snippets. I mean, that just makes me want to see this movie more.
yeah, I mean, he has like his role is really nice, and it's a pretty big part of the movie. But yeah, it follows kind of in the vein of what are we talking about? Baby Driver, Widows, and Wind River, where he's briefly there, gets the story going, then he's gone.
I mean, I
So
guess we'll see
very
Ford v Ferrari later this year too. We'll see kind of if he has another little 5 minute part in Ford v Ferrari.
yeah.
Maybe he'll get to
So
10 minutes of runtime this year. 10 minutes.
10
Maybe
minutes
he'll
of
get there.
screen time, probably millions of dollars of residuals coming in.
That's what happens when you're Shane on The Walking Dead.
Anyway, so we'll move on from John Bernthal and we'll talk about Brittany Runs a Marathon, which had a very limited release. It's only in 5 theaters this past weekend. This has been a pretty buzzy film. I know Nick's talked about it before. This is something that was really talked about when he went to Sundance earlier this year and has gotten a pretty solid amount of buzz from there on out. I've heard this is just a really pleasant, happy movie, which is kind of nice every now and then. And so I'm excited to see this expand a little bit more and really, hopefully, find its audience. This is another Amazon distributed movie, so it's just interesting to see as they really begin to establish their presence in the theater going market. It's interesting to see movies like this when they roll them out.
No, for sure. Nick has raved about this movie, and a lot of people have really talked about how wonderful this movie is, and I think it absolutely killed it this weekend, just in terms of per theater average. I mean, I believe it won the per theater average, right? It was first place, kind of in per theater average earnings. Yeah, $35,000 in its per theater average, and it only came out in 5 theaters, so $175,000 kind of in its first little weekend. I'm looking forward to it just because I think it's neat that they're rolling it out kind of in this way. They're taking their time with it, and yeah, this is a movie that I'm definitely interested to see because I've heard such great things, and it seems like a pretty unique movie. But it's going to take a little bit of time for it to roll out. I hear probably by the end of September or something like that is when it's going to be kind of at its full peak expansion. So it's going to take some time. Uh, but really solid start for this movie, and I think that this sort of strong opening weekend, just in terms of its limited release, will give it decent buzz here on out.
Yeah, I'd agree. I think this has been a buzzy movie from the start. I think it's going to be a buzzy movie until it wins whatever awards that buzziness warrants. So I'm certainly excited to see it expand over the next couple weeks. And so, other than that, that's all for the new releases. But there was some pretty big movie news going around this week. So, as you might know, Spider-Man is, or may not still be in the MCU. Nobody really knows what that, that looks like at this point.
Really,
But these
this is breaking news to me. I didn't hear about this.
The Sony Marvel deal fell apart, which whichever side you want to take. But they weren't able to renew the agreement they had. There were lots of reports of Disney wanting a much larger stake in the Spider-Man movies, as well as I even heard that they expressed interest in having creative control over even Venom and some of the other spinoffs. So Sony and Disney were unable to reach a deal. So Spider-Man has split from the MCU, but there's a million different ways that could look like. I don't know. How do you think this transition or lack of transition or whatever you want to call it is going to really pan out?
Couldn't tell you right now, but I will kind of try to put a finger on it. I think it's tough because we're going to see Tom Holland continue to be Spider-Man. I think that we learned that this past weekend at D23. He said that he's still going to play Spider-Man. He's still very excited to play Spider-Man. Kevin Feige didn't sound very optimistic about the future of Spider-Man in the MCU because when this first broke, I'm like, you know what? This is wild. This is huge development, but I feel like they might reach a deal. I feel like Disney doesn't want to let this go. But from what I heard over the past weekend, Kevin Feige did not sound very optimistic at all. He said that there was a finite amount of time they had to make the Spider-Man movies in the MCU, and he said they told the story they wanted to tell. So it's kind of a bummer to hear it. From a business standpoint, from a just pure fiscal standpoint, I am all on Sony's side on this one. I think that they need to protect their properties. They can't be going 50-50, and even some of the reports that were saying 70-30, they can't do that either. Sony needs a lot of control over the character of Spider-Man. They don't have as much as Disney, not even close. I mean, Sony still has PlayStation. They're huge in the TV business, so I mean, they're making their money elsewhere. They don't solely need movies, but they need Spider-Man. Spider-Man is just such a huge character, and you can't let Disney strong arm you there. No, I think what this does kind of point to is that in terms of major blockbusters, there really isn't much artistic. It's not really about the content, and I think that it just comes down to the dollars and the bottom line. And I think that that's what we're seeing here. Now, I really want to see the Tom Holland arc kind of continue because I think that they left things wide open for uh, exploration at the end of Far From Home. I think that they gave themselves a great opportunity for a third film. Um, so I really want to see that story continue. I'm okay if he doesn't have to have a crossover with MCU characters, but I'd still love to see him continue that story that they had already started. But I don't know what's going to happen. I think it's going to be a while before we really find out uh, where things are going to land in terms of this. What do you make of it?
Yeah, I mean, we're in pretty uncharted waters at this point. I mean, the deal that kind of brought Spider-Man into the MCU is something that we've never really seen before, and so its fallout is going to be kind of the same. From what I understand, and so where it gets dicey is no one has really outright said that the continuity is going to change or that Spider-Man, can't still exist kind of in this world. But it's going to get dicey because there are elements that Disney owns and elements that Sony owns, but they're all part of this world they've built for Spider-Man. And so seeing him kind of ripped out of that will be really awkward, especially considering the role that Tony Stark has played in this version of Peter Parker's life. To not be able to mention him, or Spider-Man can't say the name of the guy that gave him all the tech he has. There are a lot of loose ends that I think Sony and Marvel are going to have to figure out how they want to tie. I think it could be interesting to see Spider-Man kind of move into his own. I know that's been a common complaint with this franchise is that it's basically Iron Man 3.5, Iron Man 4.5. Like it's very fixated on Iron Man for a Spider-Man movie, and so seeing him kind of return to his world could be kind of nice. But yeah, it's really hard to gauge where this thing's going to land. I know, I mean, I love Spider-Man. I don't really like Sony as a production company, just because I see I, they make a lot of bad moves trying to just chase after profits. I mean, that's kind of what tanked uh, the first Spider-Man franchise and the second Spider-Man franchise, and so I'm hoping it won't take the third Spider-Man franchise. But I do know they're eager to get Venom and Spider-Man together, and I don't want to think about that just yet. But as far as Sony standing their ground, I agree. Spider-Man is really all they have. They do have Jumanji, which is starting to become a franchise, and I mean Charlie's Angels, depending on how this next reboot really pans out. But as far as like guaranteed successes, they really only have Spider-Man, and so I definitely agree with the stance they took on that. And I love Spider-Man in the MCU. I'm gonna miss having him around. It'll be really odd, just seeing how the MCU deals with that, with the kid who's kind of been pitched as the next Iron Man. He's kind of supposed to carry a good chunk of the next couple phases on his shoulders. Just seeing him gone, it'll be interesting to see how they fill that void, and then how Spider-Man fills the void of the larger universe with Spider-Man 3, or however they want to take moving Tom Holland's Spider-Man forward.
Yeah, it's a tough situation. Um, I don't know where they're going to go from here. I just really hope that kind of at the end of the day, we're not going to see a fourth Spider-Man in the span of kind of 20 years or so, because that's not what we need to happen. And we know that Tom Holland's going to continue, and I really hope that is the truth. I hope that Tom Holland does continue to be Spider-Man. That's what we're kind of being led to believe right now. That's what's being said. But anything can really happen, and I hope that that is kind of what happens in the end. Um, we'll see what happens, but this is wild developments that I just don't think a lot of people were prepared to hear this development. I think that this is something that has been kind of creeping up on people, but we didn't really know when kind of the hammer was going to drop. for this news, but this is something that was kind of coming and coming, and now here it is, and it's a pretty crazy situation overall.
Yeah, and I think it'll be really interesting to see how they move forward with this next Spider-Man. I could see them now that multiple universes have really been played with in the MCU. I could easily see them be like, oh no, Peter got sucked through a black hole with all his friends, and now they're in this Spider-Man only universe. So I think they definitely have room to kind of play around with that, but it is going to be weird, and it's going to suck because now we've had Spider-Man in the MCU, and we're going back to not having Spider-Man, not giving him the ability to, sit in PE and watch a Captain America exercise video, or or hang around with Iron Man, or be an Avenger, and so it'll be really interesting looking at it going forward.
Yeah, no, for sure. Definitely agree with that.
Yeah, so that kind of wraps up everything that's going on with the box office this weekend. Next weekend will be interesting in the fact that it's not going to be interesting. It's Labor Day weekend, which is pretty much always seen as a dead weekend. Hardly anything ever releases on Labor Day weekend, if anything at all does. Normally, you'll have some re-releases. The top earners of the summer will normally come back to IMAX or 3D or whatever the premium formats are, and we really don't have just anything new opening up next weekend. We'll probably see some solid performances from some of the current top 5 box office earners. But nothing really that exciting going on over Labor Day weekend.
Yeah, there isn't much coming out next weekend, but yeah, definitely, as you said, we're going to see a lot of the kind of current top 5 just perform well next weekend, kind of have small drop-offs. There is a Chinese film, Niza, which has made 585 million worldwide. It just came out a few weekends ago in China. It's going to be coming out in the United States next weekend, so that's kind of one of the only new releases, but it's not getting many theaters. So yeah, we're not really going to be seeing many new developments in terms of new releases next weekend. But yeah, we'll definitely see a lot of the current top 5 perform well next weekend. And in that respect, yeah, it's going to be kind of a slow weekend at the box office, kind of just the same old stuff.
Yeah, so check us out next weekend. Um, Not sure what we'll be talking about, but we'll probably be talking about something. And remember, as always, you can check us out online at moviebabblereviews.com, and we'll talk at you later.